I've second one's for you, Bruno. So
Cool.
one of the writers in says that they have a tenant that claims she can cancel her lease agreement with 5 business days notice, according to the Consumer Protection Act. She says that she doesn't have to pay any penalties. She gives a reason for the cancellation. She says that it's because of cockroaches and mice that are within the premises, but she won't consider that the landlord brings out an exterminator to remedy the situation. Um, the the writer says their understanding is that she still has to pay a penalty in the circumstances if she wants to cancel that lease.
Sure. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. We discussed it just before we started. So so first of all, we're looking at the 5-day rule, right? Now, Consumer Protection Act, if memory serves, because I don't necessarily do a lot of the supplier consumer law when it comes to the CPA, but if memory serves, there's almost a cooling off right when it comes to direct marketing. This typically, like when we deal with evictions and rentals, we refer to this as like no fault cancellation sort of thing. So when can you get out of a contract without anyone being at fault and you just want to get out of it? The CPA is a great thing for this. When it's direct marketing, then you can get out, no issues at all, right? So that's one aspect of it. In this instance, and I mean, property rentals are very seldomly direct marketing. It's not something that over the phone somebody calls you and you take out the service. So I'm not even going to look into what direct marketing is. It's doubtful. So to answer your question, the 5-day rule, no, forget the 5-day rule. So now let's start looking at terms of contract. You signed a contract and there's an issue. The issue is you received a property that has mice and cockroaches.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. In terms of Consumer Protection Act, you received a defective product. Aside from Consumer Protection Act, you would have received a defective product. So I think it's fair to say there's a level of defect, right? Now we start looking at questions of materiality, number one, and number two, the ability to remedy this. And this is where I struggle with the question a bit. Is there a defect? Yes. Could this be considered a level of breach? Could you enforce a right requiring the landlord to remedy? Totally agree that you can. But now the question is remedy. Can you return the product and say, sorry, this is so material that there is no possibility of a remedy? And that's the problem with this question is the tenant is refusing to allow the landlord to remedy the breach in fairness in the only way that seems possible. So look, I'm not into pest control. I can't give you a number of different options that one can take, but normally with rats and normally with cockroaches, there's really only one way of dealing with it. And the landlord is willing to deal with it. So now a cancellation of the contract based on breach, requiring the landlord to remedy the breach, but not allowing the landlord to remedy the breach because you don't like the methods that he's going to use to remedy the breach, that could be problematic. And if I look at it objectively, I'd probably say that the landlord's use of pest control would be reasonable. But again, so this is, I know that people have moral objections to certain things, and I respect it completely. I do respect it. But in a contractual relationship, is that enough? And I feel that if we look at it, my gut tells me that the landlord has offered, landlord is willing, you're getting out of a contract that's binding on you using this, and the landlord's willingness has to count for it. And if you do want out of the contract, you would probably need to rely on the early termination clause, which carries a penalty with it. That's my gut. I would probably need to research this further to see if there's other examples, but that slight problem on the use of, on how the landlord's going to remedy is obviously going to be the turning point. It's going to cause a pivot, and I'm leaning more towards the landlord is doing what he can.
I agree completely. For me, there's got to be some level of terms that are put on the landlord if, as you say, it's of such a defective nature that you can do that. Because obviously, are there enough cockroaches and mice that this makes the property uninhabitable, or whatever the case is? And then to not allow the landlord to actually then remedy, that doesn't sound like it's going to go in favor of the tenants in the circumstances. As you say, the tenant can still then, provided it's in a fixed term, cancel in terms of another provision of the CPA, but that's going to be at least 20 business days and no way to escape penalty in the circumstances.
Exactly. And then refusing to allow the remedy to take place, and like you said, yes, the cancellation, the penalty. It's all gonna come down to that.
Yeah, 100%.